some introductions. My name is Deborah Oberding. I'm the Community Success Consultant here at Yellowdig. My past life was an a coach. Okay, we'll start over. I previously was an instructor in the School of Education for 20 plus years. From that role, I went to an instructional designer position. Then before coming to Yellowdig, I was the educational technologist. So happy to find Yellowdig. Really what I tried to do through all those roles was to create a community with organic conversation, and never really worked with the tools I had. So when I found this platform, needless to say, I was thrilled, and I'm thrilled to be part of the Yellowdig team now. Brian?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Verdine. I'm Yellowdig's VP of Academic Product Engagement. What that means in practice is that I do a lot of the support for students and instructors, and I also take feedback and work on the platform quite a bit. I came to Yellowdig about 4 years ago from an academic background. I got my PhD from Vanderbilt in psychology, and then did a postdoc at the University of Delaware, and started getting into ed tech. So with that background, I've done a lot of the research on the platform as well, and that's kind of what I bring to answering a lot of questions about Yellowdig as they come up, or to give advice about how to get the best out of the platform.
All right, we'll go ahead and jump in. We'll be sharing. There we go. All kickout session. Welcome. Okay, today our goals are introductions, which we just did. We'll be sharing a lot of resources for you to use throughout your semester or your 8 weeks, depending on how long your course is. We'll look at the design and pedagogy principles. We'll jump into the platform. We'll also talk about the recent updates and features that we have getting ready. We'll talk about those important things to do and steps to do to make sure it's an enjoyable experience for you and your students. Please, as we go through this, if you have any questions or things come to mind, just place it in the chat, and we will definitely have time to get to those. So to get in touch, first of all, we would suggest, if you haven't done so already, to take the instructor certification course. This is a 1-hour self-guided course. You can stop and resume it at your convenience. It's really gives you a wonderful foundation about the philosophy behind Yellowdig and the mission, and also the best practices. Additional resources. We see here we have our knowledge-based articles, which really is your one-stop shop for everything Yellowdig. And I will show you once we get into the platform how you can access that. If you have any questions, or your students have any issues, I should say, with Yellowdig, please reach out to support@yellowdig.com. Again, we encourage that you really do use that. They are great, and we don't want you to be burdened with different questions your students may have or issues they may have. So, and we have monthly office hours. That is a great time to chat with either Brian and I, or Bob, or all three of us, depending on the day and the time. And just to bounce ideas off as well, questions you may have, we're there. So a little more informal in the office hours and very informative. And then the last thing is the instructor certification course, which we just talked about. Okay, we're going to start with a little bit of foundation knowledge about Yellowdig and the community of inquiry, which as an instructor in the School of Education for so many years, this really speaks to me. And so we know to have that complete educational experience, the students need 3 things: that cognitive presence, teaching, and social presence. Cognitive presence being that basically the activities, assignments, those ways you're going to meet the learning objectives. If you think about the backward design and how what you're going to design in a way for the students to understand the content. Teaching presence, that's you basically, and how you design and facilitate the process of the learning environment that you created, whether it's hybrid, face-to-face, or online. Social presence is one that it's so important and a lot of times missing. We may think when we're in a face-to-face classroom, we have that social presence because there's people around. But when you think about the social and presence of being part of the community of inquiry to really reflect, communicate, connect, expand, and share, a lot of times we don't have that in our learning environment. So that's really what we focus on here at Yellowdig, and what we have to bring to the table that I'll just say it, a discussion board doesn't. So, so with that in mind, when we think about a place for students to, again, have that social interaction, when you think about maybe after class or at break or whatever, they're talking about the content that they just discussed in class, how valuable that would be to bring to a platform so everyone could jump into that conversation and add to it. And that's where we see the benefit of Yellowdig, because students are rewarded by what we call social points in Yellowdig. Brian, anything you'd like to add?
No, I mean, you covered it a little bit in that I think a lot of people assume, a normal class design, even on ground, is sort of has social presence because you can see that there's other students around you in a classroom, but often the classroom situation is just a hard place to really have a meaningful conversation where everybody can really take part, including those quiet students or the students in the back. And I think Yellowdig really allows that space to be created regardless of the type of course that it may be. And it's super important, whether you're online or on ground, to have those connections with other students, be able to ask questions. If everybody's confused, you get the feeling that you're not alone then, and you sort of, there are a lot of benefits to having the ability of students to interact with each other and with you. So, um, in general, we see a need for this across a lot of different courses, and think that Yellowdig is working out really well across those.
So we're going to talk about the Yellowdig difference. This is a diagram that represents, or a visual, I should say, a typical social assignment, also maybe known as discussion boards. So let's take a look. We see the instructor at the beginning of each discussion, basically posting the discussion question. And we're looking at that discussion being posted on a weekly basis, discussion prompt. And so all the students basically are answering to the instructor, not really conversing or having a conversation with others. They're just wanting to check the box off. I completed that assignment. It's a type of assessment. You notice the go-getter here comes in early, but really has no one to have a conversation with. So the go-getter's behavior is modified to maybe I'll just wait till the end of the week when there are people in there. But again, what are they doing? They're answering the question or the discussion prompt that was posted by the instructor. Those of you that have taught online, either hybrid or face-to-face, also probably have experience with the discussion board and may really connect to this visual here. Brian, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, as I've thought about this problem and sort of why it's hard to get a lot of really good back and forth conversation. First of all, if everybody waits until the end of the week, there's no time to really have a good back and forth conversation. If everybody's coming to coming to a discussion board or whatever social assignment that you have once a week, there's really not a lot of time to interact. But most importantly, that student that's coming in right at the last minute is, responding to the prompt or responding to the assignment that they were given by the instructor, and then, often commenting on a couple of other students. But, um, then when the deadline lapses and the next week starts, nobody's ever going back and actually reading what that student said or interacting with them and actually taking part in the conversation. So those students that are already procrastinating at the beginning of the course are really not having a social experience at all, because people, they might be responding to other people, but nobody is ever really talking back to them, which is a really interesting problem, in terms of this assignment, sort of checking the box in terms of social presence and actually changing the experience in a positive way for those students. And the only other thing I'll say is those students that are procrastinating are not necessarily bad students, right? You're giving them a deadline. You're telling them it's okay to respond right before that deadline. And in some cases, they're probably actually some of your best students. They're the students that are working on other things and working hard on those other things. And then they're coming in because they can, they know they can do this assignment right at the end. So that's what they do. And when a lot of students do that, you just don't get a very good interactive social assignment. You don't get social presence from that situation.
And then here's our Yellowdig community. So this makes me so happy when I go from that slide to this slide. Okay, so we see the instructor not necessarily at the beginning of every conversation, aka not using prompts. We see them being a productive community member by adding to the content, sharing links, sharing videos, sharing ideas, looking at the comments and adding to that as well. You can also see students start conversations, and we'll talk about how they are content relevant by topic tags here in a little bit. You can see how the student may have a question and look at the other students in here helping to answer the question. And again, you think of the learning process of not only understanding the question of another student, but answering that, and then maybe even doing an application type example for that student to understand a lot of learning, and the process of learning is going on through that process. And then look at the dotted line. So just because you may have talked about something in week 1, doesn't mean that you wouldn't love to have the students bring it back, or the instructor, in week 3 or week 4, because it is that construction of knowledge that we went throughout the course, and connecting one topic to another shows that they're synthesizing that information to construct that knowledge. So the ebb and flow is quite smooth, and you see the variety of students throughout the entire week, not just at the end to get or to meet the deadline.
I think the only thing I would add is that, we do think it's important that students start their own conversations, and feel free to ask questions. It's a major difference sort of in how we think about Yellowdig communities being used as opposed to a sort of standard discussion kind of framework. Reason being is, if students are able to come in and ask questions or share things that they find interesting that's attached to their own lives, first of all, they can get the information that they really need. If they're confused about something, they can ask a question, and get help from other people on it. They're also more likely to be sharing things with the community that are interesting, that are really relevant to something that's going on in their lives, or maybe relevant to their own expertise, especially if they're an adult student. Maybe they already have some experiences with some of the things you're talking about in your course. So that option, those options, and having students be able to start their own conversations is a great way to get them more involved, get them more interested. They're more likely to come back and find use in the community, and therefore really get a lot of the advantages of it.
Yeah, and that's surely is a key aspect when we talk about motivating students, right? If they can get in a community that they can expand and connect to real life experiences, that's a huge motivation factor there as well. Okay, 3 easy things to keep in mind getting started. Let's check those out in the yellow on the left. Remember that Yellowdig is a single assignment, and you will make one assignment link, and it does connect to your LMS system, integrates, I should say. Most students, their access issues may relate to the specific text settings or not actually clicking on the assignment link. So once the students click on the assignment link, and you may remind them of this, it helps the LMS, or it does connect the LMS to Yellowdig basically. And so it's a lot of our support tickets seem to be, they haven't clicked on that Yellowdig assignment link yet in their LMS. So, and you too, as well, the instructor needs to click on that as well. Don't invite them any other way, because you do want the grade passback. And that way, like I said, it connects your LMS system information with Yellowdig information.
Yeah, just to sort of build on that a little bit, there are other ways that you can obviously invite students or anyone into your community. Those 2 other ways are email and invite links. Generally speaking, if you are using Yellowdig with a student and with your LMS, you're going to want them to just go in through the LMS from day one. And as Deborah said, if they're having any kind of access issue, definitely have them reach out directly to support at yellowdig.com. In most cases, the vast majority of them, student access issues and a lot of technical issues are related to browser settings, um, uh, or things related to the browser, like browser extensions that are blocking functionality. Ad blockers a lot of times are an issue. But the bottom line is, our team is trained at recognizing what those things are, solving them very quickly. So if students are having any trouble, just have them reach out directly to us. Have them copy you if you want to be aware of them or whatever. But have them reach out directly to us, and we'll get them taken care of as quickly as we can.
Right, right. And as we get into setting expectations, that is one thing that we encourage too, is to make sure they understand to reach out to support at yellowdig.com. Okay, Brian, you want to take this?
Sure. So, we're always hard at work on our platform, and we're sort of constantly making updates and improvements to it. A number of things that have come out lately have related to point management. So I think you'll likely notice them if you've used Yellowdig before, but we have made some improvements to the log. We're keeping track of point adjustments that have been made on individual posts, so you can see if other people on your teaching team or if you've forgotten that you adjusted somebody's points before, you'll see that, or added accolades before, you can see all that. We did update the point report page, and we've made it more easily sortable and searchable. Along with that adjustment, in the point report table, you can now do bulk point adjustments. So if you want to adjust points for multiple students, you can do that. A way that we're hearing about people using that is to, give students a bunch of extra points if there's a week off or something like that, and they just want to give them, make it clear to students they can take that week off. You can give them a set of points for fall break or something like that. But that's some new functionality in the point report as well. There are a few other things just to mention quickly. We are able with Canvas now to send groups or sections from the Canvas LMS into Yellowdig. So there are options for doing that if you're using Canvas groups. And we also have LTI 1.3 available for Canvas and Blackboard now, and we're testing it with other LMSs pretty far in that process. So one of the things that's coming along with LTI 1.3 is a lot more functionality related to roster management, the ability to see which students have entered Yellowdig from your course. We're also doing some things with setting up um, Yellowdig assignments automatically and detecting that. So it's a big important improvement. We do have to work with your LMS administrators to get that in place. So we're working on that. But if you at your institution know you're still on LTI 1.1 and would like to upgrade and can get us in touch with your LMS admin, we'd love to talk. And then finally, we've just been working on various kind of display and warning optimizations to make it easier for people to understand if they're hitting any problems, or if they're trying to do something that the platform is not allowing them to clarify those. One big update or one important update is probably not that noticeable to most people, but I think it's really interesting for instructors, is that now if you put an accolade on a post, it will go back to the top of the feed for your community. So if you think a post is really interesting or really good and you want everybody to see it again, recognize it with an accolade, it'll pop back to the top of the community. Everybody will get another chance to see it. I think that's about it on recent releases.
All right.
We'll show a few more things in the platform as we jump into that.
We will. Yeah, so we're going to get into the platform next. We're going to give you as we go through the platform, we're going to talk about and connect the ways that the Yellowdig community can improve your course. And we're going to talk about motivation, course relevance, instructor presence, and data to inform teaching. Motivation being the gainful learning points that we'll talk about. Course relevance, we'll talk about topic tags, instructor presence, we'll talk about modeling and accolades, and then we'll talk about the wealth of information you have right in the platform itself to inform your teaching. Okay. All right. This may be a good time to ask questions if you have any, or let's take a look here. We're still good. All right. Okay, here's Yellowdig. As you see, it is one continual assignment, single scroll. You will notice it looks similar to social media, but it is not. You can, let's see, let's first go into the points and how earning points. We talked about the motivation for students and how this gainful point system works, how to earn points. So creating a new post with 40 words, 280 points. Commenting on another user post, 20 words, 210. Or per word, notice we value commenting more than just continuing posting. And again, because our goal is to have that organic conversation, not just to post the same thing over and over and over again. Here's where Yellowdig shines, if you will. Receiving a comment from another user. That's the social points we were talking about earlier with the social presence. 70. Receiving a reaction from another user, 55 points. Again, we suggest you keeping these default settings, especially the first time that you use Yellowdig, and really make your students aware of this widget right over here that keeps an ongoing updated information about their earnings on a weekly basis, their goal, I should say. They can go in here and see their participation log, my participation, and explains everything to them. And this really is the way to have the students check to see where they are to meet their goal. Again, this right here will turn green as they get closer to meeting their goal. Couple things, getting started, you will see as you begin or go into your community, you will see these 4 things. Please follow the 4 things. And like I said, if you follow and leave the default settings, this will be a 4-step process, which will take probably 30 minutes at the most. You're going to set your first day, that to earn points. Notice it says to earn points, not first day of class. So if you'd like them to be able to start earning points a couple days before with introductions and so forth, and then the last day to earn points. A good thing to check your viewing periods as well. It gives you a breakdown of each period, and you see the first one. Why does the first one say 1 week and 6 days, Brian? That may be.
Yeah. So our system automatically breaks your community into week-long periods, and it puts any remaining days and hours in the first week, right? And the reason that we've done that is so that if you're starting a community, it gives you kind of the first week a little bit of extra time to jumpstart for your students to get in, get a little bit familiar with the platform, and then start earning their points if they're a little shy at first or whatever. So that's the idea. So when you set the last day to earn points, that will also set your rollover day and time, and that will be the rollover time for the rest of the semester. You can adjust all of these things in point settings later. So I would recommend, as you're just setting up your community, pick the days and times that make sense, go through, set up your topics as you'll see in the next few steps. And then if you really want to edit anything later, you can go into the point settings and go at it. But as Deborah said, a lot of those point settings that she was talking through are the defaults that are in there according to our recommendations. And we did a lot of research on them. We've looked at our historical data across thousands of communities, sort of looking at what produced the best overall results, gets good conversation, gets people giving positive feedback about Yellowdig. And so a lot of them, we kind of know what will happen if you edit them. And we've selected ones that work pretty optimally across a lot of different situations. And one thing I guess I just wanted to mention while I'm back on the topic of the points and the individual rules, those social point rules I think are just so important. Giving a number of points for students that receive comments from another user or reactions from another user. And I just want to dig in really quickly on why. First of all, students don't start earning points in Yellowdig until they come in and create a post or a comment. If they can earn points from other students interacting with their content, they're compelled to come in earlier in the week to start sharing and start conversations and continue those conversations. And they're also compelled to create content that is thoughtful, articulate, on task with what the rest of the community is thinking and caring about. And what that means is that students come in earlier the week sharing better content, which makes the community better for everyone. And people are more likely to come back more often, which makes the community better for everyone. It kind of gets the ball rolling in the right direction. And those points are super important for that. The other thing that I think is important to mention is, a lot of people are thinking like, I don't want my students to get points for reactions. Reactions, as it turns out, are a really important indicator that students are reading content, right? So if a student reads something and they thought it was good and useful, they're more likely to react to it. If students aren't reading, they don't react to the posts. So it turns out that reactions are actually a really good indicator that students are consuming information and finding information that's useful. They're finding things that are worth reacting to. So communities with more reactions have students that are reading more and getting more out of it. And the biggest thing in terms of predicting learning and course outcomes is actually the number of reactions that students give out to other students, not the number of posts they create or comments they create. It's the number of reactions they give out, and it's because they're reading things.
Right. And I might just interject as well that, we talked about motivation being one of the things that Yellowdig community does, motivate your students. And as Brian talked or clarified, when students come in early and get those social points, AKA comments and reactions for quality posts, well, that's just encouraging the behavior that you want to see. Rather than, if you go back to that visual where you see them all coming in at the end of the week. All right. Okay, let's go back to our platform. So we were going through the getting started, and we had talked about setting the start date and end date. We're going to continue on to topics. When you talk about course relevance, this is where topics come into play. Actually, topics come into play for course relevance. They come into play because they can also inform your teaching. And you can also use different data in Yellowdig to see who your experts on certain topics are. So a lot of different things that topics do in Yellowdig and why they're so important. So as you create your new topics, you're basically looking at your course content, and you know what topics you're going to cover. I know as a former instructional designer, we were all about learning outcomes on a weekly basis or learning objectives. So if you want to look at that and deconstruct it with specific topics, if you can take out the topics that those learning objectives cover, that's how you make your topic tags basically. Let's look at a couple things that we now have available with topic tags. You can go in and point earning disabled. So let's say the Q&A or question, or excuse me, the Q&A topic tag. Oh, sorry about that. You have the Q&A topic tag, and you no longer, or you never did want them to get points for asking a question. So if you go in and you click that right there, you will see, you'll see a little craziness. Okay. And so you'll see the dotted lines around these topic tags, which no longer have, they can no longer get points for these topics. They can still use them to connect to, but they no longer can get points. So that's a setting and something that you can do within the platform. You also can organize your topic tags to maybe the first 6 that the students see that you want them to be brought to mind when they're creating their post. Continuing on then in the getting started, you'll have these great quick short videos that give you information on best practices within Yellowdig. Introducing yourself, we suggest you do an introductory video within the platform using the 90-second feature, and then that just models that behavior for the students. Model the conversations you'd like to see as you're in the platform as a community member, adding content, connecting to prior knowledge, submitting articles that connect to different comments and topics that were discussed, and then acknowledging exceptional contributions. We like to think as the instructor as a guide on the side in Yellowdig rather than the sage on the stage, and we'll talk more about how that looks with something called accolades, which are like badges, which we're going to talk about here shortly. So again, really 4 simple steps to setting up your community. I would suggest you go through those steps. Here, I just talked about setting expectations for your students. If you click here, it'll bring you to the information on how to do that, as well as a syllabus template that you may want to use in your syllabus that explains Yellowdig a little bit more, along with the introductory video that you create, and there's many here. Knowledge-based articles right here. and best practice tips and more resources right there. I did want to also tell you knowledge-based articles are found within the platform, right in this question mark here, and you can find everything you ever needed to know or wanted to know about using Yellowdig. Let's see. We've done the 4-step setup with getting started. And when you get in your community, create your community, that will come up automatically. So you'll remember to do that. One other thing I want to talk about as best practice when setting up your community, we talked about how Yellowdig motivates students, how it is course relevant by so motivation with our gainful points that we talked about, getting in early with quality content. We also talked about topics, course relevance, and now we're going to talk about instructor presence. Instructor presence, obviously by modeling the behavior you want to see, but also by using accolades. Accolades are ways to reward students for a variety of things, depending on what your accolade is. Taught me something new, helpful, verified response, which is my favorite, community building, great question. Notice they get bonus points for these. And they are given, I would say a handful a week, depending on the number of students in your course. But they're giving somewhat sparingly, but yet this encourages the students to do just that, give it a great verified response. For instance, let's give a situation where you may use verified response. You are seeing a quality conversation in Yellowdig. You're not going to jump in because sometimes, not always, then they're looking for you just to take it over, whether it's in class, hybrid, or face-to-face. You've probably all been in that situation. But instead, you can give them an accolade, a badge that says, great, verified response. This discussion's great. You're right on track. And then you could go to our filter in Yellowdig and filter by accolade, filtered by verified response. And all of the posts that received a verified response would come, you would see all of them at one time. This to me would make a great study guide, if you will. And also you can click on that accolade that's given and it will do the same thing. It will filter them. Like right here, I could click on that and you'll see all the posts with a verified response. The filter feature is a great way and for you and your students to filter by topic. If you're going to have a quiz over learning and memory and want to see all the conversation that where that was discussed, you can also sort by recent post, active post, and you can also, which I just learned last week, you can type in specific words in the search button, right, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. So I type in Yellowdig and there we go. All the highlighted words. So great.
There's actually a good example. It's also a fuzzy search, so it will find things that are kind of related if they're spelled just a little bit different.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So we've talked about, how a Yellowdig can make your course content even more relevant because of, motivation, because of course content and course relevant, and also now instructor presence. I would like to point out here the recent accolades. We talked about the importance of accolades. This is new, the recent accolade widget. What this does and reminds instructors too the importance of giving accolades. Right?
Yeah, a few things that I would add about the accolades is, we set up a few of them as examples of interesting ones we've seen before, but they are fully configurable. You can make them your very own to spice it. The verified response one that Deborah mentioned is one that we like for kind of showing students correct answers to things. If you're letting them do sort of Q&A, it's a quick and easy way to say, hey, this is a this is a recognized good response to a question or whatever it may be, but you can really use them as you see fit. I think just choose kind of guidelines on using them. I would recommend using at least a handful per week for most class sizes, right? Give out a couple so that students see what you want to see. They understand what you're looking to see in your community, and they'll model their behavior after it. But don't give them to every single student for every single thing they do as like a check the box kind of thing. Um, First of all, it kind of loses its specialness. It's not as much
Mhm.
of a thing for students to try to get if every single person gets them. The other thing is it'll just take you a lot of time, and so it doesn't actually have the positive impact, and it takes a lot of time. Um, if you're giving them to every single student, right? So these are a really great, fast way to recognize really good content that you want other students to follow, and by just giving out a few of them a week, you can do it really quickly and easily, and show that you're paying attention to what's in the community. One thing I wanted to mention about the topics before we go any further there is the topics that we have set up in this community are of the style we would typically recommend, which is that they use the theme or the topic name itself, and don't include something like week one or module one. um, that was on purpose, right? And that's the way we recommend in Yellowdig using these topics. Um, this way, if students are blending topics together that have been discussed in multiple weeks, they're more likely to include all three of the relevant topics. Whereas if your topic tags were something like week one, they're only going to use that topic during week one. The other problem with that is it makes students, well, first of all, they won't really think about whether the thing is related to the topic if they don't know what the actual thought theme is, right? Um, and the other thing is if they start thinking about Yellowdig as something that they can just come and do once a week, right? Because you have a topic for each week, they're much more likely to just come once a week. And that kind of breaks down what we were talking about earlier. We really want students to come multiple times per week to have and continue good conversation. So we, definitely recommend using the actual thematic topics um, when you're setting those up.
Right, and I'll just show here how students can add more than one topic that Brian was referencing. So you go into create, and the default setting is a topic must be added to each post. So let's say we're connecting this to this one and this one. And then you can see the title, you can see where they make their post. And as the word count is shown across the bottom here, as they get closer to the number of minimum words. And again, the reason it is set for that, as Brian said, all research-based and studied, it's quality content, right? Not a lot of fluff rather than many words. If they can just break it down, a lot of times that shows true understanding. And look at all the neat tools we have now. We can add any of those attachments. As I said earlier, a 90-second video. This would be great for introductions and more. Our emojis, we have way more choices now. They can draw and annotate on pictures. There's a poll feature here that can be used, formula for those STEM classes. Right here, as I talk about the new post editor features, in that gift right there, you will see our updates and our new features. And here it looks like April 28th is when this was updated with all the new features, and gives you more specific details about that. So yes, and one thing I do want to bring out that you may see and wonder about, anonymous posting. This is a feature that if students are maybe somewhat shy at the beginning, a little nervous about participating in the Yellowdig community, they can post anonymously, but you can still see it, who it is, and they will still get their points. But sometimes students may need this just to build a little confidence, lessen anxiety. And so we would suggest, pointing that out to them and if they need to post that way. Okay, let's go into data, Brian. Does that sound good?
Yeah, I think that probably makes sense.
All righty.
We definitely want to make sure there's time for questions, but we can obviously keep talking about things in the platform if there aren't. So if you have any questions that have come up or anything you want to dive into in the next 10-15 minutes in chat or Q&A, please feel free to ask about it. And, otherwise, we'll just keep chugging along.
Okay, sounds good. So right in the platform here, we have this information, community health. Here at Yellowdig, we look at the conversation ratio for kind of a sign of a healthy community. If you think about a typical discussion forum, it's two comments per post, where in Yellowdig, we're looking for 5 to 8. This is a demo community, so we're not doing that great, but look at the total comments more than the total post, which is wonderful. That's what we're wanting in Yellowdig. Why? Because, when they're actually comprehending what was posted, adding to it, bringing in real life situation, connecting to prior knowledge, that's when learning takes place and that community is created. If you're wondering again what these are, you can hover over the question mark there, and it gives you a description of each of these. Here, it's a breakdown of how many posts, comments, and reactions on a weekly basis. You can kind of gauge your accolades here too. As Brian said, giving a handful each week is healthy. One thing I did want to point out in the topics up here, we talked about using topics also to inform your instruction a bit. If you see, for instance, research and ethics was not used as much as you would like it to be, you can start a conversation with that and really kind of bring it to the forefront again. So you have this information at your fingertips, as well as who's your expert. Looks like Grace has a lot of information about agency and self-determination. Maybe she would like, to have a little Zoom session, maybe in her 9-to-5 job. She has some real life experience with that. And so I think this topic information can be very beneficial to you as an instructor.
One of the important ways that we think of using this topic information is, if by and large, we think it's really great for students to have choice around what topics they want to talk about. And if they have something to ask a question about that was from 2 or 3 weeks ago, that they should absolutely be able to go and ask a question about something that was covered or try to get some clarity, especially as they might be studying for a test later or something like that, right? But one thing, that we recognize that instructors need is to make sure that students are kind of talking about most of these topics and progressing through, right? So one of the important things that I like to say about the topic data, right, is, take a look at that every once in a while. And if you notice that your students are kind of stuck on one topic that's from way earlier in the semester, maybe that's a good opportunity to go turn off points for that topic and then just say to your students, feel free to continue to talk about this. I don't want to stop you from talking about it. But I want you to earn your points going forward for talking about some of the other topics a little bit more. And so, you've taken away their incentive to talk about that topic. They can continue to talk about it, but it allows you to kind of nudge them on to additional things, right? And so I think that's a good way to kind of gently control the situation without taking options away from students entirely. And we see that working very well. So that's another way you can kind of use those topics there for a specific topic.
Right. One thing I do want to look at quickly here. Here we go. You can see where the students are in the conversation aspect of Yellowdig. If you hover over a student, we have some outliers that are not very involved. Maybe a great time to reach out to make sure everything's okay. They understand the expectations in Yellowdig. And then this information, for those of you that would rather have a table, it is in table form as well. So really gives you kind of a bird's eye view of your community and what's going on in your community with a graph. Okay.
I'm still not seeing questions.
Mm,
So one last data thing I guess I would like us to cover, Deborah,
mhm.
is possibly the community health page.
Okay.
The
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, um
Here we go.
the health check itself.
Yep.
Yeah. I like to point this page out to everyone, especially the bottom piece here. It will show you essentially how your community is doing on a percentile score basis relative to all of Yellowdig, or to your individual school's network. If there's enough communities inside of it, you can choose. Um, what these scores are at the top is basically an average percentile of the variables beneath it. So for sharing score, it's all things related to students putting more words, putting more comments, putting more posts, and sharing more, right? More links. Um, this community is, as Deborah said, is a demo community. So these scores are really bad. They're in the 15th percentile. Hopefully you're doing significantly better than that. But ideally, these scores would be sort of, above the 50th percentile to be sort of doing better than the average Yellowdig community. I think it's really helpful to get a sense of sort of what is possible and what other people are getting in order to figure out sort of how your community is doing. So this is a great way to do that. By clicking on the different scores, you can see which different variables make up those scores and how your community is doing. If you notice that you have some red things, or a lot of red things, think about some different ways that you might be able to encourage more of that. And I will say, we see that the listening and interacting scores are much more important to be high or good than the sharing scores. Reason being is, you can get students to share a lot of information just by forcing them to get more points. But in order to get them actually interacting and actually consuming more of that information and listening to one another, there's a lot more sort of voluntary things that students do. They come back more often. They read more posts. They are more likely to, talk with one another, give out reactions to one another. Those things, being high and students doing those a lot, are a sign that students are really getting a lot out of the situation, learning a lot. And oftentimes, when the listening and interacting scores are high, the sharing score comes along with it, um, because students are seeing value in the platform. Just
All
a
right.
quick area to highlight. I think if you've used Yellowdig before and haven't noticed that, I think it's a really interesting place to check periodically and get an idea
Mhm.
of how your community is doing relative to others.
All right. Let's see. Okay, we have about 5 minutes left. If anyone has any questions or want us to clarify anything.
Since we were talking about presence a little bit, the one thing that I would just say to everybody based on research that I've done, um, commenting for instructors is correlated in general with students doing more in Yellowdig and doing better in their classes. Posting, on the other hand, is not, according to our research. And then I'm talking about instructor posting. So along with sort of giving out accolades as a good way to show students that you're around, you care what's going on, I recommend in general that instructors spend most of the rest of their time commenting. First of all, if you comment on something that you think is good, it will pop it back to the top, just like it would for any other student. So you can send things back to the top by just commenting on them, and extending those conversations. The other thing I would say is extend the conversations. Don't just say "great job" and then leave. Right? Ask that student a question, or ask the students in general a question that will extend that conversation a little bit farther. You'll see those conversations get better. Students will see that you're there, that you care what's going on. They'll see you asking good, informative questions, and they'll start asking more questions like that themselves, right? They'll see like, okay, this is how I'm. This is how the instructor behaves. This is how they want me to behave here. So I think commenting is a great way to show your presence, show students, really what you want and expect, to really try to extend conversations, ask good questions, or add additional information in. And you can do all of those things in comments rather than trying to post, everything. And by following the conversations that are ongoing, your students will feel like you're kind of included as part of the community, as opposed to sort of like overseeing it, right? And so you'll have better interactions with them in general, and um, they'll respond positively.
All right. Well, we are about to time, so I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. And please feel free to reach out to Brian or I. And let's see, Brian, anything else we'd like to end with?
No, I think we'll follow up with a recording to everybody that registered or showed up today.
Yes.
And yeah, I can drop my email in the chat if anybody really wants to ask some questions afterwards or whatever. But
Good
feel
idea.
free to get in touch with us. And
Yeah.
thank you all for showing up.
All
Really
right.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you all. Bye-bye.
Have a good rest of your day.